do it to the T. Hello. I was going to say that I find that sound very soothing.
I can't hear you.
I'm kind of serious.
No, I'm serious too.
Quote like this. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's a very unkind microphone. I do not consent to this closeness. Hello, welcome, thank you for those of you that I do not know yet. My name is Noam Faingold, and in 2017, I'm being revealed my own weird talking things while hearing myself talk. In 2017, the poet Yevgeny Yevtushenko died. I think we all know this. To be as vague as possible, things are going on in such a way at the moment that I felt a parallel between current times and some scary past times that I don't actually feel comfortable going into too much, but it felt like a really good moment to have a reaction through art. And I happen to be a person who believes that art is an important aspect of our lives. I think that we all do. We might define that in different ways. To me, who spends a lot of time looking at data about the ways that art affects community, I'm very interested in the history of artistic pieces that have changed the direction of history. So for example, Yevgeny's poem Babi Yar is widely credited with reducing anti-Semitism in Russia. And as a Jewish person, oh look, that's a really important data point, right? Where we can cite that. And I think that that's really interesting because we're constantly being told that arts budgets should be cut for a variety of reasons. The one that I encounter the most often is because it's just a nice thing that we can't afford, which I think is actually a very disingenuous thing to say. I suspect that intuitively people are actually afraid of the ways in which it can add uncontrollable variables to political situations. I suspect that nobody in Russia in the early 1960s ever thought that a poem would change how people think about other people. And when one benefits from those kinds of situations, monetarily or politically, one obviously does everything that is possible to reduce the ability of that variable to work in the way that it does. So that's just one thing that I think about a lot. Now, on the positive side, I also spend time looking at statistics that I think are very interesting. We live in a time where our mayor and city council and the whole overarching narrative of Tulsa is about growth and expansion, and look at how great our city can be, and I think that optimism is a very beautiful thing. And there are things being done for the arts that I think are great. However, lost from the conversation is the data about how people correlate their attachment to a community in the United States with the arts higher than economic considerations, business, safety, and nightlife. So all of the things that are kind of thrown out as the most important things to support, actually they correlate great, but they correlate lower than people's feeling about the arts. And so this piece that I wrote is very much a part of that conversation about what I feel viscerally as this incredibly important connection between the arts and our community, specifically our community. I think that when Mr. Yevtushenko died, we found ourselves in a historical moment. That is something that I perceived because it was a moment where anyone who is moved by his art around the world probably Googled Tulsa for the first time, I suspect. How is probably the only one word I suspect that people might ask if they've never heard of Tulsa before. And so I think that that's very fitting that one regularly finds oneself in historical moments. We don't choose them. I, however, was worried that that historical moment would go by too quickly. And so an interesting thing about writing a piece of music is that all of a sudden it creates this object, right? And even though music dissipates sort of after it's finished being heard, the piece still exists. And even more important than that, a recording exists and now will exist in perpetuity. And if I've done my job right, anytime someone finds Mr. Yevtushenko's poetry and then finds that he worked with Shostakovich or other musicians, then that will then lead them into this monument that has now been laid out here in Tulsa. And if that makes the conversation last 5 minutes longer, then I feel like I will have done my job. This is not a comment on what I think is the importance of the work itself. It's just me doing my best to keep that conversation going. And all you have to do is write something about something that you feel is important. And I feel like it has that effect of creating space, building community around it. Even if you didn't come because you've been thinking about these things, you're here now. And we are a community, one way or the other, at least for a short period of time, gathering around this monument. And so anytime that I talk to other composers, I encourage them that if they don't think about this already, to think about themselves as a sort of camera. I don't necessarily frame it that way, but my point being that we just take in the events that that refuse to not include us. And so I felt myself taken in by this historical moment, April of 2017, and I decided to do something about it. And I think that that's the bare minimum that any creator of any work, that's the bare minimum responsibility that anyone has. I think that you can write whatever you want to write, and you should write whatever you want to write, but as a general framework for what it means to be of value as an artist, you should just record things through your subjective experiential lens. So thank you for coming here to experience that lens, my lens, I suppose, in that way. And before I get too far away from it, if you're curious about that community attachment study, it was done by the Knight Foundation and Gallup. They surveyed 40,000 people in communities all over the United States. You can easily Google this. I think it was in 2015. But the OK Policy Institute also does really excellent work in showing the relationship between access to the arts in high school settings and how it helps get people out of poverty. So there are a number of things that you should go look at. That was, I think, published in 2018, if you're curious about that. So this is how tonight is structured. There was this thing that just happened, whatever this was. I'll introduce my awesome friend, Zhenya, who will give some of his remarks. We've gotten to work on a few occasions already. When the first performance of this piece was given by Signature Symphony in 2017. Andres Franco, the music director, was so on the ball in terms of the importance of the arts and its relationship to community that he was already planning a celebration of Yevtushenko and music before Yevgeny passed away. And then he passed, and then that just by default became a memorial concert. And that's the pedestal that was created for this and why we're here today in a lot of ways, because of a lot of good faith and trust and a desire to build community around things that are important to us. And then the University of Tulsa Symphony performed it twice and did their own memorial for their faculty member, Mr. Yevtushenko, brought by this man back in the 90s. Thank you, Bob, for also basically making all of this happen in your own way.